Good morning. So today we're going to look at practical considerations for research with children and elders. Developmental psychology we often think about as dealing with younger kids, with infants, toddlers, but developmental psychology actually looks at human development across the lifespan. So we include older adults in that as well. So we're going to cover a little bit on the particulars of working with older adults. That's also in your readings and will be on your quiz. So for this week, I'm going to handle this in three different pieces. A piece on looking at what we need to think about when working with infants and toddlers, with younger kids, and then we'll move on to a second piece, second video on working with older adults. And then lastly, I'll talk about developmental research designs in general. Okay, so research with infants. Infants, we need to think about alertness and attention. They have much more trouble consciously or purposefully using their attention than older children. So paying attention to what they're paying attention to is really important for researchers to make sure that they are reacting to what we want them to react to, right? If we are trying to do an object permanence study, for example, and they're not quite looking at the object, right? Or they've missed the part of the demonstration where the object is hidden, we don't know what they're reacting to, right? So if they give a pause or make a confused face, who knows what that's about, right? So alertness and the focus of their attention. Another part related to that alertness is the uprightness of their positioning. So we can support their alertness and their attention to what we're talking to them about by making sure that they're awake, which often means that they're sitting up. So this is important for infants, not as important as kids get older, but for infants, very much important. And then that last thing, we have to keep all of our assessments brief because kids at this age are not able to pay attention for very long, right? Especially the younger infants between sleeping and using the restroom and eating. If you can get a bunch of kids at the same time and the early infancy all to be awake and alert at the same time, that is already a huge feat. So you don't want to have to try to keep their attention or keep them alert for very long. One of the things I want to show you about alertness is to go back to the still face experiment. Some of you guys may remember that from courses in infancy that you've taken, but just in this little clip, it not only shows how much the kid is reacting to the mom, but even in the interaction with the mom, how distracted the kid's attention is, right? So let's look at that.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In this still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I need my girl. Oh.
And
She's already
she
looking
gives
away.
a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to
See, paying attention to
coordinate
something else, looking
their
to the side.
emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask them.
So if we focus back on what you know from infants and what you may remember from studying infancy, they tend to have a couple places where their attention will get stuck, right? They have trouble breaking their attention away from something to pay attention to a new thing. But then they also are easily distracted, right? So baby keeps coming back to mom and fixating on mom, that's good. In this experiment, they want the baby to be paying attention to mom, but is also kind of a little bit all over the place. What's that thing over there and that thing behind you, right? So there's a little bit of distraction here. I also wanted to show how much responsivity this infant is going to have to the caregiver's attention or not attention. We'll see this a little bit later in another clip that I'm going to show you as well. But infants at this age are very attentive to the caregivers, the adults, in their um, context, right? So what she's telling the kid non-verbally, how she's interacting, is really important to the kid, as we can see when she stops interacting. Okay, so let's look at this still face.
To not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like,
all right, we
come
don't
on,
need that.
Why aren't we doing
no
this?
screechy sounds. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about with infancy, and we'll look at this again for preschoolers, is the concept of temperament, right? And just a reminder, temperament is the predecessor to personality, right? It's inborn differences in kids in terms of approach or withdrawal. How do we handle new things, right? Are their biorhythms really regular? Do I scare easily? Do I like lots of sensation, lots of touching, lots of noise, lots of lights, sounds, visuals? Or do I like much less stimulation, right? So there's a spectrum on all of these different aspects of temperament, but you can imagine if you were trying to do a study where you're having a kid interact with a puppet or a mask or some other imagery, that their temperaments might really impact how the results of your study, regardless of what it was that you were trying to get them to respond to, right? So this is another thing to take into account. All right.
My name is Zoe. How do you do?
Everyone knows that a puppet show makes children happy.
Who do we have here today? She's awfully cute.
During this part of the study,
I think her name
researchers
is
want to
Emily.
draw joy from the
Is your
babies.
name Emily?
Emily loves
Yes,
the
her name
puppets
is
and
Emily.
even tries to join in on the
Hi, Emily.
action.
It's nice to see you here today. Are you having fun? Who do we have here today?
But when the researcher tries the same experiment on Jack, he finds the situation anything but joyful.
Zoe, how do you do?
His temperament is such that he's easily frightened, and he will have none of it. The minute the puppets are removed, he cheers up and is ready for more action. Next, researchers test the baby's reaction when something frightens them. Not surprisingly, Jack is shaken by the scary mask. So they bring on the clown mask. And this one really pushes him past his limit.
He's still clicking his tongue to try to get the kid to pay back attention to the scary
But
face.
Emily is very interested. She finds the clown amusing and thinks it's just a continuation of the previous entertainment. As for the more ominous mask, she just takes it in stride and adopts a wait-and-see attitude. Why does Emily react differently from Jack? Where does the...
Right, so they're gonna get into temperament more. We don't need to go as far into that. The thing that I was having you see there, again, was that there's a dramatic difference between those two kids in how they're interacting with just the prompts, right? So if you're trying to get to what kids understand from a situation. If you were, again, doing something about object permanence, it'd be really difficult to separate how much the kid's temperament is influencing their reactions and what their understanding of kind of the procedural, the procedure of the experiment that you've set up. Okay, so let's talk about preschoolers. Preschoolers still have a short attention span. It's not as problematic as infants, but it's still much shorter than younger kids and definitely than adults. So you need to keep their attention. Fast-paced interactions, definitely. You want to try to help a kid adjust. Again, this is going back to temperament a little bit, but also they're going to be a little bit more wary in terms of what's going on here. I've got some norms for how I interact with adults and who I interact with, and I don't know you and I don't know the situation. So help them get used to what's going on in the experimental situation. We sometimes call this a warm-up period, right? So interact with them about what's going on in the larger experimental design, the setup, before trying to collect data on what they understand or what they're doing behaviorally. Again, in the same kind of vein, prepare kids for the transitions they're going to see, right? Prepare them for what's going to change. Kids in preschool are used to and accustomed to praise. So you want to give them a lot of praise for what they're doing. The other thing is that they may not be very well potty trained, so you need to work with them about using the restroom, remind them to go to the bathroom. They've got to have frequent reminders that they need to make sure they go. The other thing about preschoolers is they're really easily distracted. And so you want to have privacy if possible during the experiment. This is about their attention, but also about their mostly ability to attend to what's going on, right? If you have a kid interacting with you and there's a door open to a hallway and there's people passing in the hallway, you're going to lose a lot of attention from that kid every time somebody goes past, right? They're paying attention to all those things. So their distractibility is really high. You want to make sure that you are keeping them focused on what you're doing in the experiment. Okay, so before going on to school-aged children, I'd like to show you a little about some issues with kids reporting, self-report for preschool-aged kids. They are, again, struggling with the cause and effect. Something happened before and something usually happens after. So they may be mixing up cause and effect and not doing that as logically as adults. The other thing, if you're thinking back to Piaget's stages, they're kind of maybe connecting things in a transductive way rather than a logical cause and effect way. So they may be thinking things like, I take my naps in the afternoon and I haven't had my nap even though it's dinner time, so it's not afternoon yet, right? So connecting things instance to instance rather than cause and effect or bigger category, smaller category, right? So here's an example of how that might pan out in terms of a kid's explanation of how something broke. And this is funny. Not this kiddo.
Can you do this?
No. It's a very, very long time ago. And like before I was born.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I think.
How do you know it was before you were born?
Because I didn't do it. I know I didn't do it when I was a baby. Whenever I touched it when I was a baby, I was so careful.
You touched this when you were a baby?
Well, I was so careful when I did. I was careful. I really was. I did it better.
All right. So she kind of explanation going all over the place, not quite it couldn't have been me, it was before I was born, but I wasn't until I was a kid and I touched it, but anyway. Really good logical explanation. So let's go back a little bit to temperament, because this is also going to be a thing to consider for preschool kids, but it kind of pans out in a slightly different way. We see a lot more of the needing to work on transitions with slow to warm up kiddos, kind of behavior control issues. So let's see a clip about this.
Researchers at Nathan Fox's lab bring back children previously tested for the final part of the long-term study. 24-month Ethan and his mother are introduced to the risk room to see how Ethan reacts to various stressful situations. A stranger enters. In this first part of the study, what researchers measure is how long it takes for the child, if at all, to overcome shyness and warm up to the stranger. Eventually, when the so-called stranger pulls out some inviting toys, Ethan overcomes his shyness and takes the risk.
You're gonna help me clean up?
Once he's comfortable with the stranger, they continue with the next part of the study.
Now it's time to play with Toby the robot.
Researchers wanted to find out how children react to unpredictable situations. And the toy robot is certainly unpredictable with its noises and sudden movements.
Would you like to come see our cool robot?
The robot proves too much for Ethan, even with his mother by his side.
Should we do something else?
Would you like to play with something else?
Let's put Toby away. Yeah, let's say goodbye, Toby. Bye-bye, Toby.
Bye-bye, Toby.
For the next part of the study, Ethan is tested on a set of stairs to see if he's a risk taker.
I'm going to jump off of this. Now you do it.
The researcher demonstrates and invites Ethan to try. But Ethan is a cautious little boy.
Can you jump?
One foot and then the other.
Yay!
He gets over the hurdle in his own way.
Would you like to do that again?
Emboldened.
All right. So you can see this is less of a just reactions to the new events, and more something about adjusting to the newness, or helping kids to transition between different activities. Okay, so let's go back to the school-aged kiddos. All right, so with school-aged children, we want to be paying attention to several things. They're used to the kinds of interactions that you have at school, so that can be helpful. They're used to adults talking to them. They're used to adults asking them questions that adults already know the answers to. It's part of how we interact often at school. They may be used to sitting down and doing tasks or puzzles. So this is often what we want kids to do in a research setting. So that's helpful. They may, because of this, interpret some setups as tests, right? So getting very worried about having the right answer, which can be problematic. So this is something to attend to as well. My dog has decided that she needs to join us. Okay. Because these kids are in school most of the time, school-age kids, we have to think about the scheduling, right? So getting a hold of the kids and finding a time that is outside of their normal school day is going to be important. So the timing of the research, making sure that it is not during school hours and not during not during family time or dinner is also an issue. A lot of school-age kids are also going to be involved in sports, have other things that they're other scheduling issues. So scheduling is a huge thing with kids this age. I have found in my experience that it's often great to be able to integrate into after school projects or the Boys and Girls Club, what kids are doing in those after school hours before parents get off of work. Another thing to consider with school-aged children is the issue of how they're thinking about things in more concrete terms, right? If you're again remembering Piaget and this in Piaget's stages, there's a lovely example of that in Jimmy Kimmel's stuff with kids, trying to get them to talk about adult topics. So let's look at one of those. Okay.
Hello there. Go ahead and have a seat. How are you?
Good.
Okay, well, are you interested in politics?
I don't even know what that is.
Okay. Would any of you like to be president one day? Okay, yeah, why not, right? What do you think the best thing about being the president is?
To not have to drive anywhere because the work is right in his house.
Okay.
Basically, you get to do whatever you want and make up rules for the United States.
Yeah.
Being so protected.
You like that? Yeah, you like to have Secret Service guys?
No, to make sure you don't get hurt.
Right. What party do you belong to? Sophia?
Family?
Family? How about you guys? Jillian?
A family.
Family party? Yes. I'm part of the birthday party. We eat a lot of cake. A lot of cake.
No wonder.
No wonder what?
No.
I mean, no wonder. What's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican?
Well, a Democrat is somebody who wants a government to help people if they can't be helped. And a Republican is somebody who doesn't want to.
Oh, is that right?
So you can see in that little bit of a clip that we just watched there that the kids are thinking about the world in very concrete terms, right? Why would you like to be president? So I can make all the rules, right? What is a Democrat and a Republican? Still, that's a little bit more advanced, but also sounds like something he may have heard somebody say. This kids in their school age, especially elementary school aged, not getting into adolescence, it may be easier for them to answer questions that are more concrete, straightforward, as opposed to what's the point of liberty, right? What is a democracy, right? These are big theoretical, abstract ideas. Okay, so thinking about the ways we interact in schools and what kids this age are used to. They're used to being segregated from kids at different ages, right? So we tend to segregate kids by age and grade. And the interactions that they have with older or younger kids that are not siblings. Siblings, it's a little different, but older or younger kids are infrequent. There's particular ways of talking, as I just said, parents or teachers asking kids questions that the adult already knows the answer to. What day is it today? Those kinds of things are really common for kids who are used to going to school. Those ways of talking where you ask somebody something that you already know the answer to, so it's a known answer question. Those don't happen in communities where schooling is less common, right? So that is a unique cultural aspect of schooling. Hierarchical power structure. Man, When I was a little kid, I loved to play school because I had the same ideas about teachers as those kids in the video had about the president, right? I want to be the teacher because I can make you do stuff. I get to be in charge, right? Of course, I want to be the teacher. Who wants to be the student? Now I'd like to go back to school and just learn a bunch of stuff and not be in charge sometimes. Also, independent work and evaluation. So the idea that the default is working on your own as opposed to having somebody else help you. I did a study with kids where they were folding origami figures, and even after we had offered them, we had asked them to help one another out, right? Yeah, you guys can help each other out. See, that person's got theirs figured out once you ask them, right? Even though we were trying to support this collaborative kids helping other kids, they still primarily asked for adults to help. And at one point said, well, you're just looking at mine, right? Like as if that was cheating. Abstract concepts, again, we tend to think about things in very abstract ways in school, even with younger kids, right? So algebra is essentially a set of abstract concepts that we try to get kids to understand. And then lastly, extrinsic rewards. So kids are used to being rewarded with extrinsic things, getting a star, getting a certificate, getting some sort of prize for behaving or performing appropriately. So the other thing to think about is how this might influence what you're doing in a research situation, right? Because kids are, if they're expecting this, if this is what they're used to, and you're asking them to figure something out on their own and not to ask an adult for help, that might be problematic because my norm is adults show me how to do stuff, right? Have had kids in research tell researchers, well, I don't know how to do that. We haven't been shown that yet, right? I can't begin to attempt to figure out this problem because I don't know the answer and somebody has not already shown me the answer. So different concepts of how you approach knowledge and approach learning. Okay, some other things about working with families. So you can have kids or parents help with research, doing observations, interviews, diaries about their daily life. The Child Development Project is a good example of this. Again, working with families, if you want the whole family, you're going to have to think about scheduling a bit, how to get all of the family there at once. Evenings or weekends is often your best chance for this. Weekends, I would suggest, are the best. Again, with older kids, if you're talking about weekends, where you're also running into baseball and basketball games and other things that kids may have going on. Generally, if you're trying to facilitate time with the whole family, you want to go to them rather than having them come to you. Easier for the family, and I would argue more naturalistic behavior on the part of the kids. And before we go on to special needs kids, I wanted to give you a clip here to think about the ways that parents may not always be the best at telling us about their own kids, right? So in this case that we're going to see, this comes from the House of Tiny Tearaways, interesting show about child development and having child development researchers and preschool teachers look at dynamics in families where behavior is a problem, right? So first of all, behavior is a problem. So that gives you some perspective on where these parents and these kids are coming from. But it's also good to look at, okay, so what's going on here? So let's check them out.
Louise put her career aspirations on hold to become a full-time mum. Now 27, her life revolves around Jessica and her 6-year-old sister, Hannah. I want to go and have a career, but I wanted to stay at home with them. I wanted to be the one that fetched them from school every day and took them from school. So that's a joy. It's supposed to be like a real happy, joyous time. 45-year-old Lee used to play keyboard in a band. Now an IT manager in Rochdale, his routine is more 9 to 5 than rock and roll.
I'm fortunate in that I miss a lot of the daily tantrums. I see the ones at the weekend. By Friday, she's had enough. That's it. She's had 5 days of basically looking after the kids by herself.
You can't sit in your knickers.
Go away.
Don't do that. If you smack me, I will smack you back.
She gets aggressive. She'll slap me, she'll hit me, she'll kick Lee. She'll just do things on purpose, I think, a lot of the time to get attention or out of spite. She's had tantrums up to an hour and a half, which is really, really exhausting.
2-3 tantrums a day on average doesn't sound like much, but when you add it up and it becomes 20 a week, 80 a month, that's when it really starts to get to you. We tried the gentle approach, we tried the talking, we tried the discipline, we tried taking things away. It doesn't matter what approach we take, none of them seem to work.
Sometimes I feel like I'm doing it all on my own. I'm pretty good. I'll say to them, like, you're not having sweets because you've not eaten your tea. But Lee will come home and she'll start, and she's very manipulative.
Okay. So you can already see there, we've got some things between these two parents, disagreements about what's going on here, right? But also there is a bias in terms of how they're reporting things going on with the kid because they're stressed, right? She's doing this on purpose. This is out of spite. That's a lot to attribute to a kid who's not really got necessarily theory of mind solidly yet. They're starting, but that's a lot from a developmental level to attribute to the kid, and maybe part of what's going on, but all the time. But also the dad and the mom have different views on this because of who's home more, right? So there's a lot to consider whenever you're getting into research with the whole family, right? Which perspective on this you want to take. Okay, so a little bit more here on research with special needs kids. With special needs kids in particular, they may be very reactive to the environment that they're in, to what's around them. So you want to use a familiar environment. Again, going to the kid's family, going to the kid's school, meeting them where they're at is ideal. The other thing is you got to know where the kid's at in terms of their abilities, right? So what kinds of measures you need to use to interact with the kid. What are they able to see, hear, write? How are they able to respond? I know kiddos who are on the autism spectrum who are nonverbal, right? And they can respond and they can tell you what they know. They can respond to cognitive assessments, vocabulary assessments, but they're going to do it in other ways, right? So you've got to have planned out how the kid is going to respond in ways that fit with that kid's abilities. The last thing here to say with special needs kids is that you probably want to look at their behavior of interest multiple times in multiple sessions, right? Because their variability day to day can be dramatic. If I've been practicing on a particular task every day for a week, that might be great. And then you come back a week later and it's gone, right? This is part of the kind of 2 steps forward, a couple steps back with kids with special needs, is that progress is not always linear, right? So needing to take multiple sessions, multiple interactions before you decide what the behavior is normative, what is a valid measurement of what they know. Okay, so we're going to stop there for this video. We'll come back again. We have 2 more. I'm going to talk about work with elders and research design.